Thanks everyone for having me here today to talk about this important topic. I grew up working on a farm, never owned one when I grew up, but I spent most of my summers working on a farm. And also since 2006, we bought a farm just outside of Durham, and recently just sold it and bought another one near Owen Sound. I don't consider myself a farmer, more or less a hobby farmer, and but most of my days spent working as a paramedic. Now I'm an operations manager with Grey County EMS. But both, I love being a paramedic as well as being on the farm. I also have 3 small kids, and I think about that every day, about the farm and how mistakes happen, how quickly they happen. And hopefully I can give you some information today to talk about some of the injuries, and also if something does happen on your farm, hopefully it doesn't, that you may be able to hopefully make the outcome a bit better than what it would be if you didn't have this information. So just a bit of an overview, just give you information about paramedic services, what they're about, what we do. We look at the farm injuries in Grey County, just looked at them in 2011 into 2012. We're going to talk about the activation of the 911 system, that there is some things that can happen as far as like getting the right resources to your farm, that to follow these steps, and then just kind of give you a quick overview of what to do until help arrives. So as far as a paramedic skill set is concerned, there's 3 skill sets in Ontario: primary care, advanced care, and critical care. In Grey County, we're primary care. In Wellington County, which we're in here right now, is advanced care. As far as dealing with the typical farm injuries, the primary care, advanced care, and critical care all do the primary. Same goal is to get you off of the farm as quickly as possible and into a trauma center, which would be London, Hamilton, or Toronto. So there's lots of other skills that we do. Typically, most of our calls are medical calls, so they're mostly around medical treatments, giving drugs, airways, that type of thing, starting IVs. But that's just kind of an idea of where the treatment is at with primary care paramedics today. So we do emergency patient care, CPR, mobilization, prevent back and spinal cord injuries, oxygen therapy, basic trauma life support. We do defibrillation for cardiac arrest, blood glucometry to check your blood sugar. If it's low, we'll give you something to correct it. Some pretty important drugs: aspirin for heart attacks, nitroglycerin for heart attacks and congestive heart failure as well. We give Ventolin for breathing problems and epinephrine for anaphylaxis, like an allergic reaction. Glucagon helps treat low blood sugar, and then Gravol if you're feeling sick to your stomach, and Benadryl for your mild allergic reactions. We start IVs, we put airways in to help breathe for you. We use a neat device called CPAP that every time we use it, we save a life. 1 in every 7 patients. It's a pretty neat piece of plastic equipment. We diagnose whether you're having a heart attack on the scene at your house, so we can pre-alert the hospital. And in places like Wellington County, we can take you directly to a cath lab. And then also this spring, we're actually doing pain relief on the scene as well. So that's just a bit about paramedics. These paramedics think they're farmers. They're at a local rodeo. This is Adam and Colin at the Holstein Rodeo. Just to give you an idea of our calls, in 2011, we did roughly almost 8,000 emergency calls, and we're talking about the emergency non-life-threatening and life-threatening calls. It's about 8,100, 8,200 calls. Of those, 4,900 were what we call life-threatening or code 4 responses. If you look at that compared to what we did for farm-related accidents and calls and stuff like that, the overall percentage is low. For as far as like traumatic incidents, we only did 25, which is a small number, but even 25 is too many. Most of our calls to the family farm are for chest pain, strokes, high blood pressure, that type of thing. But we do get called for traumatic incidents. The thing to take from this, though, is that when we do get called for traumas, we don't very often get called for scratches and bumps and bruises or twisted legs and that type of thing. Typically, we get called for something more serious. And if you see this here, all but 1 person was transported to the hospital when we did get called. So even though we went only 25 times, 24 of those people went to the hospital. To give you an idea of what we responded to, 10 incidents involved animals, predominantly were horses. Kicks, falls, crush injuries, penetrating injuries. There was 2 incidents where they fell from a height, from a bucket in a grain wagon. There was 2 slip and fall. There's 3 incidents with a tractor, 2 of a rollover and 1 of a roll forward with a crush. 1 person was caught in an auger. 1 person was backed over by equipment, and I believe that was a child. There was 2 fire-related. A person that was injured while cutting wood. There's an ATV accident that ended up in paralysis, and a drowning, and then a lifting injury. So you see this here, of those injuries, they're pretty catastrophic. And just reading the farm paper, they were saying the other day, I think it's anything over 9 days of loss on your family farm, you never ever recover financially. So you see these people here, there's a lot of traumatic injuries and catastrophic injuries to these people. Some of the comments we hear, whether it be on the farm or wherever, when an injury happens, you hear this over and over again. I've done that 1,000 times, 100 times, and nothing has ever happened before. When I try to make sense of that, it's whether, that if you, maybe you think you've done it 50 times and nothing's happened, but it doesn't say that it's right, okay? Just because nothing's happened before doesn't mean something can't happen in the future. And then it also said, people say it happens so quickly, and that's so true. It happens so quick, you don't have any time to respond. That's the problem. Everybody thinks that they will be able to stop the vehicle or stop the PTO or do whatever, but you cannot respond quick enough to prevent these injuries, especially around this moving equipment. And also when you think about people, I talked to one of the paramedics that had a person caught in an auger, or was an auger, was caught in a combine or corn harvester, one or the other, this past year. And the person said, I should have known better. And we should have, but again, I don't want to be a hypocrite too, right? Because I'm up here and I take, sometimes taking these risks too. But again, I should know better. I need to do better. So I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to convey to you today, is we all need to do better. The other thing to remember is that these injuries happen right on your family farm. So if you're not doing it for yourself, do it for your family. When we respond to these incidents, typically when we respond to traumatic incidents and industrial incidents, they're away from the family, they're away from where your friends and family gather. People are left with memories of what happened there for forever, right? So think about your family too, and the people that have to find you when you're injured, because there is actual stress and trauma to them as well just by seeing this. So if you do happen to have an injury, and hopefully you never do, just what to do, call 911 as soon as possible. I hear sometimes people, they call somebody else or they go out to check just to make sure that there is 911 required. We do not mind if you call 911 right away. Okay, so if you think somebody's hurt, please call us, because we can always cancel. The thing is, you don't want to wait 15 minutes to go out to check to see if somebody's hurt, and then you get out there and your cell phone doesn't work and somebody has to drive back to the front of the farm or wherever to call. If somebody comes in from the farm or outside and they say somebody's hurt, call 911 right away. Know your address, especially if you're using a cell phone. It's getting better with cell phones when we have coordinates now that can actually get you within a few feet, but it doesn't work all the time. So know where you live, know common reference points. If you have a choice, always use a landline, right? And again, it's not always available, but when you use a landline, the address comes through the anti-alley drop, and that's an automatic address notifier where all that stuff is computerized right on the screen where you are located. But if you use a cell phone, it's not quite so easy. But if you do have a cell phone, that's your common way of communication. Make sure that you know your address and common area, like as far as physical points to reference. And again, call early, and then when you get more information, call back. Because if you call out to, say, a farm and we're a 15-minute response, if you just say somebody's injured on the farm and we don't know, and somebody could be unconscious or like severe injury, if the information is minimal and there's nothing to trigger extra resources, then they won't be triggered till the paramedics get there. So, for instance, if somebody has a head injury and they're unconscious, you would want the helicopter to come. If you don't tell us that right away, the helicopter won't be started until we actually arrive on scene. Also with tier response, if somebody's caught up in an auger or those type of things, or where they're impaled and we're going to have to do cutting and remove people from equipment, if we don't know ahead of time that that the person is trapped, then what happens is it's not till the paramedics get there that the fire department started. There isn't in all places, like in the city of Guelph and where I'm from in the city of Owen Sound, they're pretty much automatic on all calls that they go to emergencies. But in the rural areas where they're volunteer fire departments, they need to have certain criteria, like somebody being trapped, before they'll start them. So if we know ahead of time, especially on the callback, they will get them going before we even get to the scene. And all this, the whole idea of all this is to save time, right? If you get hurt on a farm in a traumatic incident, you want to be in a trauma center within an hour. And in our area, for sure here you can do it. In our area it might be a bit over an hour, but you can be in these trauma centers, which is going to save your life in that period of time. We landed this helicopter in just outside of Durham this past summer, and we'll have to land that helicopter right in the field if we have to. And that's the more, and we talk about importance of updating. You want to update as soon as possible. Somebody comes in and says, there's somebody hurt, back in the field, and then from there, 10 minutes later, you find out that they're caught up in equipment, so you call back to 911. That from there, at least at that point, we will know that they're trapped and they're impaled or whatever, that we'll actually get that helicopter going. So again, give us that information as quickly as possible. And again, the goal is to get you to the trauma center in London or Toronto or Hamilton as quickly as possible. We had one person caught up in a corn harvester this past year, and it wasn't too much over an hour that he was actually sitting in London. So again, that's our goal, is to get you there as quickly as possible. So what to do to help arrives? Again, I can't say enough about know your address. You have to call 911 right away. And as soon as you get more information, if you don't have the full story, let us know, update us so we can get the appropriate resources going for you. Protect yourself and others. I know everybody hears about it and we see it far too often, where people have succumbed to their injury, right? If they've already succumbed to their injury, the chances of them people coming back is almost zero. So don't put yourself out there for somebody that's already succumbed to the injuries. Okay, so be very careful of that, especially entering pits and that type of thing. If they've already died because of what happened, the chances of getting them back are almost zero. And there's a good chance that you'd be right along with them. So be careful of that. Prevent further injury to the patient. So if it is safe to approach the patient, this isn't a first aid course, but there's pretty basic stuff you can do as far as common sense. Keep them warm, keep them still, protect them from further injury, keep them from moving around. If they're bleeding, just put pressure on the wound with whatever you have there and push as hard as you can. Those type of things. And that's really your basic first aid. And the last part of this is to take care of yourself. If you do see this stuff, it can be quite hard on you. Like to see, traumatic events to friends and family. Understand there is a period where you'll actually have trouble, maybe sleeping, don't feel like eating. Some people turn to drinking, that type of thing. Typically, those reactions last 3 to 4 weeks. But if it goes longer than that or they're severe, make sure you seek some help. That's it. Any questions?
Any questions for Kevin?
Of the 25 or whatever it was you had casualty or farm incidents,
Yeah.
how many were casualties? Didn't make it.
Well, the drowning.
Yeah, I figured out.
And I think that was it as far as didn't make it. But the one person was paralyzed. One person, I believe, I think they were able to save his leg, but it was close to losing it. So, and again, this is just on the year. If I go back other years, there's people pinned, killed, tractors rolled, all those type of things, and trying to keep it as current as possible. Like, there is a significant amount of people killed on the farm. Like, one's too many, but every year, there's 3 or 4 people that are.
Do you have any information on patients that were transferred without your help? Any stats on their injuries or how they were?
No, and that happens quite often too, where people will just pick, a person up and take them straight into the hospital. And I wouldn't have any way of gathering statistics. That would have to be the hospital. But we recognize that happens quite often as well. What I do recommend, though, is that you don't do that, because of what comes into play, right? As far as like if they're serious, because our goal is not to take them to the local small town hospital. Our goal is to get them to Toronto or to London. Even if the helicopter isn't on scene, we'll actually drive to where they can land, and we won't even go to the hospital. So we want to, again, our goal is to be off the scene within 10 minutes and meet up with a helicopter somewhere along the way, or at the hospital wherever we can. So.
Just a point on the know your address, what a lot of people seem to sometimes forget because they're farming a lot of different properties now.
Yeah.
I recommend that people keep a list in your tractor or on in the pickup truck of all the emergency addresses of all the properties they're working.
Yeah, that'd be
Because usually the accident's going to happen at the other farm. And if you don't have that with you, you really don't know where you are.
Oh, for sure. And it's a lot better now with the newer technology cell phones where you can get geo-coordinates. Before, it was really tough to validate the address, especially you think you know where you live until you're in an emergency. And it's amazing how often you make that mistake. You give the wrong address, and again, it's costly that time. It's all about time to us and to you.
What's wrong with taking them to the Guelph hospital?
Okay, don't let me put hospitals down, because the hospitals do a great job.
Okay.
But they have to go where they can do surgery, right? So that's where the trauma centers are. So if you look at London, Hamilton, and Toronto, they will go to those hospitals. Victoria in London, St. Mike's in Sunnybrook, you know, all those hospitals. In the short term to stabilize you, these hospitals are great, right? But the goal to anything, as far as trauma is concerned, is surgery. Right? And we need to get you to a place where they can do all that. You know, some abdominal injuries and stuff like that, I can't really speak to Guelph, but I would think that they may be able to handle that. I'm not sure, but anything to do with your head, we'll have to go to one of those centers.
Are there fees involved when you call, or for false calls?
Not for false calls. Like there is there's a regular fee for $45 for the transport. It doesn't cost any more for the helicopter. It's all $45. And if it's a canceled call, there is no fee. And again, we don't mind. We're there to serve you. And if you call and you end up that you don't need us, that's no problem. We'll just cancel. It's fine with us. We'd rather come than not come. So if you get the information and we're not required, you can cancel us on the phone. If we get there, it's not a big deal. We'll check the person out and we'll leave. We'll probably try to convince the person to come, because again, that's what we do, is to try to take these people to the hospital. But you know, it's up to you at that point. And,
Thank you very much, Kevin.